Hi, welcome to Carissa Explains It All. I'm Carissa, I explain it all, and this is part one of a series of 4 videos that I'm doing where I'm talking about the last 6 weeks of the shadow work and emotional healing journey that I went on. This particular video starts off with an emotional flashback episode. It's a CPTSD episode, so complex PTSD. And I feel like all my videos on my channel, they're all about shadow work and things that can be triggering. So trigger warning, but also that's just what I talk about on my channel. So if that's not for you, that's cool. But just know there can be triggering stuff that comes up in all of my videos because that's kind of the point of my work is to be triggered and then learn through it and grow through it and heal through it and come out the other side stronger for it. So this video starts at an event that happened 6 weeks ago, but let's back it up just a slight bit to 8 weeks ago is when I first posted this video that a lot of people saw. It's this one. It's why nobody gets you. It's if you always feel like you're too deep for this world. And that video did really well. Most of the videos on my channel do usually 2 to maybe 400 views, 200 to start off with, and then over a 6-month period they'll grow to 300 or 400 views, right? So this particular video grew to 23,000 views in a period of 2 weeks. I was just mind blown that 1, people are watching my videos, 2, they're resonating with it, 3, other people feel the same way that I felt. That video, even though I'm addressing the viewer in that video, I was just talking to me. Those were all my thoughts that I had been having over the last week or 2 prior to filming that video. And so I was just I'm sure this will help somebody. I can't be the only one that feels this way. So I filmed that video and posted it, and it turns out 23,000 people resonated enough to click on it at least, and then, and then watch it, and then a bunch of people commented, and my subscriber count doubled. And it's just all this stuff that as a YouTuber, it's obviously I want to create stuff to make an impact and to this is my form of expression and I enjoy it just for the sake of doing it. But also as a YouTuber, right, on the business side of it, I guess, you're looking at the metrics and you're okay, I want to hit viewer counts and subscriber counts, whatever, right? Because you're putting your message out there to be seen and to be heard, right? So you're using metrics to kind of gauge am I making something engaging? Is it keeping people's interest? Is it serving people, right? So you kind of have to know those things in the back of your mind. And so it was the logical part of my brain was oh my gosh, yay, progress. We're actually making it work. I'm doing something right. People are resonating. Great, I'll keep doing more of this kind of stuff. But my nervous system felt a completely different way. It was pump the brakes. No, we can't handle this. This many people seeing you, you don't, but this is my nervous system talking to me. It's you don't believe that what you say has value. You don't believe that you can be successful at this. You've been wanting to do YouTube for 10 years and you've never made a go of it, and now you are, and it's things are starting to work out. We don't believe that things can work out. So no. No, we cannot expand past this. This is not comfortable. It's unsafe. It's unknown. We don't know how to protect you if you go beyond what we know. So no, we're gonna pump the brakes. So the way that I found out that my nervous system was talking to me like that was an inciting incident that wasn't even really anything, but there was a comment that was nice, but kind of hit me the wrong way, and it triggered me, and it triggered a CPTSD, complex PTSD emotional flashback episode, which is different than a vulnerability hangover. It's different than feeling just plain, not that this is any better, but plain shame or embarrassment. It's a bigger thing that your body and nervous system can go through, and I will talk about that in just a minute. And this comment wasn't anything even really bad, but it made me question the way that I was being perceived by viewers, and I was that's not how I'm trying to come across. And I wasn't defensive, but I was just horrified that maybe someone took what I said or the way I was in a way that I did not mean for it to come across. And it was this crazy event, and it wasn't even anything bad. I've worked in customer service for 15 years. I've dealt with people being jerks and saying horrible things, right? And that's never triggered an emotional flashback. This was a particular, just a super particular episode where this comment just hit, and all of a sudden I went into what's called an emotional flashback. So I guess I'll get into defining it. Basically, I had an emotional flashback last November, and it was the first time I actually looked up what it was that I was going through. And because it's not the same as a panic attack, though it can feel panicky, and it's not the same as just shame or embarrassment or vulnerability hangover. It's more intense, and it's like extremely debilitating. And so so I looked it up, and I finally found a resource that has just blown me away in how much it can, I don't want to say cure it, but like how seen I feel. Like I have cried several times just reading this book, and it's not even an emotional book. It's pretty clinical, but because I felt so like seen, and like I'm not it's not that I'm incapable, it's that, I went through some real stuff that was traumatic for me. And there's nothing wrong with me. It's just like my nervous system is hypervigilant because of it. And so, anyway, so this book, it's called Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. And I believe he's a psychologist or a therapist, and has been for 30 years. And so this book is so chock full of like wisdom that's been chewed on, like not just knowledge, like this is what you're going through, but like wisdom that has come from knowledge and experience. The combination of those two has crystallized it into wisdom. And just with every sentence, I feel so seen. And I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but like I can't even describe how much I just love and appreciate this person, this author, Pete Walker, and their soul for like putting this book out there, because it's been a lifesaver. It was really helpful after I experienced the emotional flashback episode in November. And because I experienced that and then read through this, I knew I had it as a resource. It still took me like 24 hours to pick up the book and use it, but once I did, it calmed me down out of the flashback episode I was having. So let me kind of define it for you real quick. So according to Pete Walker, the author of this book, he writes the definition of complex PTSD. It's a severe form of post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm going to paraphrase and kind of skip through, but he says it's delineated by 5 of its most common and troublesome features: emotional flashbacks, toxic shame, self-abandonment, a vicious inner critic, and social anxiety. Emotional flashbacks are perhaps the most noticeable and characteristic feature of CPTSD. Survivors of traumatizing abandonment are extremely susceptible to painful emotional flashbacks, which, unlike PTSD, do not typically have a visual component. That's kind of the tricky part, is like something will happen. Like I read this comment, and it wasn't even the comment that I think that triggered me. It was that the comment triggered the self-critic within me that was like, we have a lot of shame and abandonment around this particular, like around how I'm perceived. And it just triggered that inner critic to then look really harshly at me with that shame and embarrassment. And so it was so acute. And the thing is, it's not a visual component. It's like a freeze response where like my nervous system literally went into like, I don't know what to do, I can't function. And it's this like feeling of like going in and out of like your body. It's really wild. It says emotional flashbacks are sudden and often prolonged regressions to the overwhelming feeling states of being an abused or abandoned child. These feeling states can include overwhelming fear, shame, alienation, rage, grief, and depression, and they also include unnecessary triggering of our fight or flight instincts. It's important to state here that emotional flashbacks, like most things in life, are not all or none. Flashbacks can range in intensity from subtle to horrific, and they can also vary in duration, ranging from moments to weeks on end, where they devolve into what many therapists call a regression. In my intro video, I mentioned that like this 6 weeks that I'm talking about, it felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And so having an emotional flashback, it was like, okay, I posted this video, it did really well, and I didn't think I was having some kind of reaction, but then all of a sudden reading this comment and like it triggered this inner critic that was like looking at me with that like shame and embarrassment. All of a sudden it triggered this emotional flashback. And it feels like, what the heck? I was moving forward and now I'm like sliding back. I'm regressing. And I don't, like my now perspective, I can see I wasn't regressing. It triggered something that needed to be healed in order to keep moving forward. So it was a necessary pain point to address. Not necessarily pain, but necessary pain point to address and heal and then process and then move through so that I can move forward. So I can move forward again without constantly fearing how people are perceiving me. I'm not saying that I've like cured it completely, but there was obviously like a big chunk that needed to be dealt with over the last 6 weeks. So this feeling of emotional flashback, for me, it lasted like almost a straight 24 hours. It was, here, I'm gonna get out my journal because I actually drew this picture of what it felt like. Let's see if I can get it without showing everything. So this is what it felt like. Is it focusing? There we go. It felt like this little shadow bit is like me that I normally am at my baseline. And then this like outline is like the version of me that I had expanded into by posting this video and feeling like I made progress. And like everything where I'm putting myself out there and like trying to be this new version of me that's more brave and like more courageous to just share and to go for it with my creative expression is like that outline where I haven't like fully expanded into that yet. And this emotional flashback, all of a sudden I shrunk back to the safe zone, like internally, just this safe space of like, this is who I know I am and who I can be. And it's wild because it felt like the years and years of healing that I've done, it felt like it was all for nothing because all of a sudden I felt the outrageous, overwhelming amount of emotions that I must have felt as a child and couldn't deal with, but it was all coming up now. And I'm like, I'm a grown ass adult and I've done all this healing work and this shadow work. And I feel like I've done none of it now in this moment. And that's actually a sign that you're having an emotional flashback. And it doesn't mean that you've totally regressed and it's all for nothing and you haven't made any progress. It just means that this particular thing flashed you back to that feeling state of when you hadn't done any of that work and you didn't have the support and you were going through traumatic events. So now I'm going to read a little bit of my thoughts as I was journaling this because I basically, so I read the comment, I was like, oh fuck, like I'm not feeling great. This is really shitty. I was like, I should go for a walk and clear my mind. And I was like, I don't want to be seen. It was nighttime, like no one was going to see me on my walk, but I was like, I just don't want to be exposed. Like I felt so overexposed already, feeling like just going outside and while going for a walk around my neighborhood I just felt so vulnerable. There's no way I could just be out. Like I just wanted to curl up with a blanket and just be protected and like feel better. I just didn't want to feel this way. And it was horrifying how overwhelming it was because I felt like I'm stronger than this. I have come so far. There's no way I can be experiencing this. Like what is happening to it's confusing. It's terrifying because the feelings you're feeling are terrifying. And then you're just like, why? What's happening? It's overwhelming and very scary. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna journal this because one, I need that validate. Like, obviously, I'm going through something. I need the validation of like, it's okay that I'm going through this, and I'm feeling like overwhelming amounts of like shame and like hating myself right now. I knew like logically, I'm like, this is not rational. It's clearly purely emotional, and that doesn't discredit it, but I need to do something about it because it doesn't do me any good to soak in it. It's like that's self-flagellation. Like I may be feeling extreme hate towards myself, which is wild. But also like it's not okay for me to stay in this because it's cruel to feel that way towards myself and I won't allow it. So we're going to move through it. So I was like, I need to journal, one for that reason. And then two, for posterity's sake, I knew like I would want to reflect on this later, possibly do a video just like I'm doing with my Diary of an Alchemist series, but I didn't think I'd be sharing it like, 6 weeks later. I thought, maybe years later, but anyways, here we are. So I wrote, I feel horrified, mortified, embarrassed. I want to shrink back into myself, into my shell. I want to hide. I want to shrink. I feel like I want to throw up. I rewatched a little bit of the video just to see if I could understand where this comment was coming from because it totally took me out of left field. I was like, this is not what I perceived I was saying when I said it, and so then I wrote cringe, fucking cringe, mortified. That's not how I meant it. And just kept saying, I was like journaling about it, and I'm not going to read all that, but I was just like, Jesus, this hurts. I want to shrink so bad. I think that journaling helped stop the shrinking feeling, and I was able to breathe and just exist. But I was like, I can't get any smaller. Like I feel like I've shrunk as much as I can, and I still want to hide. And I just wrote, that's okay. I'm allowed to exist in this state. I don't have to change it or fix it, but I want to soothe myself as much as possible. And everything that I would normally do to soothe myself is not working. So what's going on, What happened, what I can remember in real time was, I finished journaling that night and I was like, I just feel like curling up with a blanket. So I did that. And I just kind of like cried myself to sleep. Sometimes that's all you can do, right? Like I was just like, I just need release and I need relief and I need to just stop thinking. So that's what I did. And I woke up the next day and I was like, okay, I felt anxious. I felt like that kind of like panicky attack, but it wasn't a panic attack, but I felt panicky kind of in my chest and mostly my stomach, that kind of really anxious feeling. And I was like, okay, I'm going to ground. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to eat my oatmeal. I don't think I had coffee because I didn't want to exacerbate that anxious feeling. And then I wanted to go to this place that they have it's like a farm stand with fresh fruit and everything. So my husband had the day off and so did I, and so we went up there and I just couldn't shake the feeling. Like I was trying to distract myself. Like usually that's my happy place, and he was like, let's go for a drive. And I just felt it was the first time that I was like, I want to get back to my life because I want to figure out what's going on. Like distracting myself by a pretty drive. I can't even enjoy the drive because I'm so anxious. I just feel so overwhelmingly scared for no reason, right? Like obviously there was a reason in my nervous system, but like there was no outward threat. And I think that's the hard part about an emotional flashback is there's no visual component to it. You're like, I don't even know what's setting this off right now. I just feel so terrified and it's overwhelming. So that night, so I think I just kind of like got ready. I was packing for a camping trip I was going on. So I just kind of did that and just tried to listen to like tarot readings, like where they're like saying nice things about me and stuff. And I'm like, anything I can to change this narrative because I know like all these cruel thoughts I'm having about myself, it's not. I don't want to say it's not real, but I'm just like I don't believe those anymore. It's an old narrative, it's an old way of being, and but I just don't know how to stop it. It's like running like a tape right now. And so I just like the most loving thing I can do is to not think. And so the only thing I can do to not think about those thoughts is to just change the thoughts, right? But I can't do that myself. So I just listened to the tarot reading just as I was going through it. And then finally that night I pulled out the book. I was like, I kept thinking like, I should. And like when you're like going through something, you're like, I should do this because I know it'll make me feel better. And then you're just resistant to it for some reason. For whatever reason, I was like that till just about 24 hours later after the original incident. And I pulled out this book and I started reading through it. And he's got 13 steps on how to help yourself when you're having an emotional flashback. And it calmed me right down. Like, I was like, seriously, I let myself go through this feeling for 24 hours. I could have just read this book and been done with it. But you don't know, and you do the best that you can when you're in it. But anyways, so I'm going to read this entry from 3 days later because then I am reflecting on what I went through. And then I'll read the book, the 13 steps that he says to go through. And then I think we'll call it a day for this chapter. So I wrote, what happened 3 days ago was an emotional flashback that's part of CPTSD. My book on that helped explain and validate all of that. The shame and the hyper internal criticalness that lasted 24 hours, it ended when I started reading all about it. And oddly enough, it soothed and calmed me down. And I need to remember that if that happens again, I just need to cuddle with my husband and read that book. I've set intentions for this week to work with those aspects of the 13 steps that were very difficult for me to do during the episode. So that's one of the things in those 13 steps, because I'd read that book last November. There were some of those steps that I had remembered and I was practicing. So I was actually doing those really well. But what I wanted to do was I was like, I can't know if this is going to happen again, but if it does, I want the thoughts and the know-how of how to combat this and how to talk myself out of it, just in case I'm not near the book. I took a picture of it, so I have it on my phone, so it's with me too. But what if I'm not near my phone? I want to know how I can handle this myself. And so then I journaled through those different aspects, the hypercritical aspect of me, the perfectionist aspect of me, and what they're doing in an emotional flashback that's very hurtful, and how I can combat that and say, no, I'm not going to listen to that, or we don't think those things anymore, stuff like that. So I wrote, I knew I needed to love her, my terrified inner child, but I hated myself. I hated myself for being different and for exposing us. So my inner critic, hated my inner child in that moment with the emotional flashbacks. It was like, how could you have put us out there and exposed us on video, right? And that video is not even anything to do with me, really. I'm talking to the audience. It's just wild. Whatever. My inner critic just, was just like, you put, like, to my inner child that wants to create and to express myself, was just like, you put us in danger. How could you? And like, you're so different. And like, why did you do that? Like, you put us in a really vulnerable spot. And it's just wild, the amount of hate that my inner critic had towards my inner child. Like, it's wild, Ugh. Someone commented on that video. This is a different comment I'm talking about, and they wrote a really long comment, and I wrote a really long comment back. But they were talking in detail about how this hyper vigilant inner critic can be so debilitating, and that is 100% true. And so, if you're going through that with a hyper vigilant inner critic, this book is very helpful for working through where that comes from, how it's working within you, and how to kind of release that. Because it's really hard. It makes life really hard when you have that voice in your head that's like always telling you no, you can't and you shouldn't, because it's trying to protect you, right? It's not like a mean, horrible aspect within and of itself. It really is just trying to keep you safe and trying to keep your nervous system regulated. But when you're trying to expand and grow and create and express, you have to go outside of your comfort zone in order to do that. But if you've experienced stuff like, traumatic events that have really messed with your nervous system and not let you feel safe in your own space, in your own body, in your own expression, it can be very, very hard to expand outside of that comfort zone. And that's, I wanted to create a YouTube channel for 10 years, and I'm only just now doing it. And I had this massive thing. Like, this is why this protector aspect of me is very strong. And it's like, we do not do what's uncomfortable and unknown, because that's not safe and it's terrifying and you will expose us, and we could die from it, is what it feels like. And that's what it's trying to communicate. But when I'm here now in my present body, and I'm like, there is no danger, there is no threat. And if there is, I can take care of us now. But you have to like go through this process of becoming aware of that inner critic, and becoming aware of the nervous system, your nervous system, and how it needs to be, it needs to experience something differently. And yeah, just is wild. Anyways, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm gonna get back to my journal. So anyways, I really, at that time, I just hated myself for being different and for exposing us. The feeling was like I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. That was the other thing, that shrinking image that I showed you. Not only did I feel like I was totally shrinking in, but I also wanted to crawl out of my own skin. I didn't even want to be me. It hurt so bad to be me in that moment. I didn't want to be me anymore. It's wild to me how overwhelming that is. And I'm 35, almost 36. And the intensity and overwhelmingness of those emotions that I felt, that's me as a grown-ass adult right now. And I have all the knowledge and awareness of all the healing that I've done in the last 6 years. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like for, don't get choked up. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like for the child version of myself, right? Like, no wonder I self-abandoned and completely cut off my emotions and just went with my logical, rational mind for like 20 years after that. Because if you don't know how to handle that, how else do you cope with life? You have to move forward. You have to like go to a job. You have to provide for yourself. Like, just like shutting down was like the kindest thing I guess I could do for myself to continue moving forward and be able to provide. And now it doesn't serve me to do that anymore. And now I'm doing the healing work of that. But it's just wild to me how much trauma a human can go through and still pull through it and move through it and function. But it's just so messed up that can be done to us at such a tender young age where we're like defenseless, It makes me mad is what it makes me. Yeah, but anyways, I felt completely helpless again, unable to speak, unable to move or change. It hurt and it sucked so terribly bad. The book said there's a significant biochemical change in the brain and body that can take time to subside. Over-adrenalization can turn into an adrenal exhaustion before the adrenal function can be rebalanced. Decreasing the intensity of a flashback with a quick remedial action decreases the time it takes for our physiology to recover. This was really helpful to understand because I was like, this is insane that this feeling is lasting 24 hours. I can't. Like, how do you move beyond it? And it was really helpful to read that there's actually a biological component to this, that when your nervous system gets into this fight or flight state, it is perpetuating this shock and you're trying to rebalance, but you keep depleting before it can rebalance itself, which is why it keeps perpetuating. So just the awareness of that, I think, is what helped me to start climbing down out of it. It also mentioned that the expression or micro expression of disgust or contempt can be especially triggering if your caregivers looked at you like that. Instead of soothing whatever was triggered, they treated you with contempt for existing and for having these feelings. This can lead to incredible internal pressure to punish yourself for existing as you are. And I hate even saying that. And like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't think it was that bad. But clearly, if I was wanting to, I wrote it. I said, I knew I needed to love her, my terrified inner child, but I hated myself. Like, if that's not punishing oneself for existing, then what is, you know? And I think that's what's so healing about this book, oddly enough, is that it doesn't let me escape the intensity of the trauma that occurred to my nervous system. It is calling it out and saying, it was rough, it was tough. You need to acknowledge just how much you've been through, and don't downplay that, and don't downplay how much work it's taken to heal yourself, and acknowledge that. And that, I think, was a huge component of learning to value myself. And that's really the big cycle that I was going through in the last 6 weeks, is learning to value myself just as I am, just for being and who I am, so that I don't feel like I have to perform when I'm on camera and feel like I have to perform when responding to comments and stuff. These are the things that I'm coming up against in the last 6 weeks of why I didn't continue making progress with making YouTube videos, because my whole nervous system was on stop and was like, we cannot continue on the way that we've been, which is to feel like in order to get love and acceptance and connection that we have to perform, and that people are going to want things from us, and it's not going to be reciprocal, and support's not going to be consistent. And it's like all these things I had to work through in order to release them so that I can continue making videos without all that emotional baggage attached to it, right? Because making videos doesn't necessarily mean all that stuff, but my nervous system was making it mean all that stuff. And so this is the first part where I was breaking down, like, valuing myself no matter what. And that means coming to an awareness of the intense inner critic and feeling like what I've been through maybe isn't valid, or whatever, whatever I was thinking was making me think, I don't think what I have to say is that meaningful or that valuable or whatever, like, it's insanity to me. But clearly that was getting triggered. And so this is the first part of the 6 weeks that followed, where I'm like reclaiming my value and my worth, and in just being me, and so that I don't feel triggered and don't feel resistance towards making more videos. Because, like, it's not that I lacked the motivation or the desire to, it's that my nervous system was like, this is not safe. Don't expand, don't express, don't do it, because it's terrifying and we can't handle it. And so I had to kind of go through all these things to break that down. So there was more to this, but I'm trying to make these videos not super long. I'm going to go through real quick what he says, what Pete Walker says are the 13 steps to go through for an emotional flashback. And I'll read just one example of like how my inner critic and perfectionist aspects of me, of my ego, that's trying to keep me safe and protect me, were harming my inner child during this emotional flashback, but in order to keep us safe. So I do want to go over it, but I also feel kind of bad, like, this is his book, and so, like, I want to support him, and so I'm not going to give away all the steps. I think, if you want to know, buy the book. It is so worth it. But yeah, I'll go over just a couple of them. One, say to yourself, I'm having a flashback, because flashbacks take you into a timeless part of the psyche that feels as helpless, as hopeless, and surrounded by danger as you were in childhood. The feelings and sensations you are experiencing are past memories that cannot hurt you now. I think I'm so glad he has that as number one, because like that literally starts triggering the process to climb down out of that hypervigilant inner critic state. Another one is to own your rights and need to have boundaries. Remind yourself that you do not have to allow anyone to mistreat you, and you are free to leave dangerous situations and protest unfair behavior because you're not a child reliant on those caregivers anymore. You are able to own your boundaries and set them and honor them. Remind yourself that you're in an adult body with allies, skills, and resources to protect you that you never had as a child. When you're feeling like that small and fragile feeling, like I demonstrated with that little image, that's a sign of a flashback. So remind yourself, I'm in an adult body and I can breathe and I can soothe myself. I can get a blanket, I can get food, I can get water, I can watch Netflix, like whatever it is, I can resource myself because I'm in an adult body now, not a child's body. And you kind of like forget that when you're in the emotional flashback. You just feel so freaking small. And so you remind yourself of that, you know? Yeah, he has, I guess I'm only gonna read like 3 or 4, but that it's just super helpful if you're ever experiencing that, or if you know someone that experiences emotional flashbacks where they just feel totally tiny, helpless, paralyzed, and unable to do anything to help themselves, even though maybe you've seen them help themselves before, they could be experiencing that, you know, in their nervous system, you know? So such a good resource, and I'll put the link to it in the description box. I want to address just 2 things real quick, and then we'll wrap up the video. One was from my perfectionist aspect of my ego that was really upset at my inner child for expressing ourselves and like putting ourselves out there and exposing us, making us vulnerable. This was something that he goes over in the book, and then I was processing through it in my journal. So he wrote, you know, he writes about, and I was writing to affirm this: mistakes do not make me a mistake. I internalized that so harshly from someone I'm not going to mention, and so I conflate the two. I can practice not conflating the two by saying being me means that I'm allowed to make mistakes. In fact, when I'm making mistakes, I'm reclaiming that I get to be my own person and not someone made specifically for this person that I felt was very harsh. I am not made specifically for someone like that or anyone else who may trigger that feeling within me for them to take out their own self-contempt or pain or loathing out on, because that's not my role. I don't play that role for other people. Not anymore. And by making a mistake, I'm actually proving how okay it is for me to be my own person. And when I fully claim that and feel that, then I'm allowed to see the mistake objectively and work out how to fix it and repair it and make amends because I trust my capability to do so. And if the other person decides that they're done with me because I made a mistake, then that's their loss. And I actually love saying this in the voice of Lucille too from Arrested Development. There's this scene where she says, "That's his loss," but she says it like 3 times over. She's like, "That's his loss. That's his loss. That's his loss." And it's like, it's fantastic. I love it. And so I'm like, I'm going to claim that for myself because it also makes me laugh. Right. So, if the other person decides that they're done with me because I made a mistake, then that's their loss. Right. Said in Lucille 2's voice. And honestly, my gain, because it moves me and my inner child away from unhealed and hurtful people who can't have a real and healthy friendship anyway with me. Right? So helps me move me away from old codependent dynamics. When, you know, if they cut me off, then that's actually my gain, you know, because I'm moving away from people like that, because I know that I'm doing the healthy thing, which is to recognize that I made a mistake. I'm human. Everybody makes mistakes. It's a very human thing to do. I know for a fact that I've healed so much of this and that the flashback was an episode of old energy and not proof of how incapable I am now, because this is not how it gets to go down with me anymore or ever again. I think I wrote, "Bye, Felicia." The other thing that I struggled with was the intense self-hate, self-disgust, and toxic shame. Now, I used to have this voice like regularly. It was my main voice in my head. Like 10 years ago, that's how it was. So I healed a lot of that by choosing not to have those thoughts and having different thoughts instead. I listened to a lot of motivational speakers, Tony Robbins, and all those people back then to heal out of that. And then in the last 6 years, I've done the spiritual and emotional healing to uncover the root of it and release it and let it go. But obviously, there's still a little aspect lingering that's in my nervous system that keeps me safe, that embodied those voices of the people who are external from me that had that toxic shame and disgust. And in order to stay safe from those people, I internalized that voice and made it part of my ego protective mechanism, the part of me that filters and analyzes myself to make sure that I don't step out of line so that I don't incur that wrath from someone in the external world. But I just kind of forgot, I guess, that version of myself was still there until it reared its ugly head and was like massive self-hate in this moment just 6 weeks ago. And I'm like, where is this coming from? I thought we'd healed this, you know? And I think this is just lingering last remnants to release and to purge and let go. Like, I don't need to carry that anymore. And I just needed like the hardcore like beliefs and new like Tom Bilyeu from Impact Theory calls them bright lines, like basically boundaries you don't cross anymore with yourself. So I struggled the hardest with this voice of self-hate and disgust and toxic shame, and I couldn't stop it. It's just what it felt like. So I get to now practice the hard line thought stopping of refusing to trash myself. It's just a straight up hard line boundary. What's supposed to happen is I turn shame back into blame and disgust and then externalize it to anyone who shames my normal feelings and foibles. And I feel like I'm still processing what that means and stuff, but I actually got that exact phrase from that book. So that's not me trying to come up with a new way to think. That I took that from that therapist with the 30 years of knowledge and experience turned into wisdom. So I don't even fully understand that, but I guess that's the way it's supposed to happen, is when someone tries to put their shame and blame on you and disgust on you for like just existing for, you know, or like just like making a mistake or something, then like that's not okay and that's not healthy, and they need to deal with whatever they're going through, not you. It shouldn't be put on you. So you have to learn to flip it and turn it back on them, like the blame, the disgust, which is hard because I'm like, I want to treat everyone kindly and compassionately, right? But just know I guess that's the healthy way to protect oneself when that's not yours to take on in the first place. I wrote, what I have done to survive is to side with the criticizer and triangulate against my child self. If I always see where the other person is coming from, if I always see their trauma, their reactions, their intentions, but what I get to do in this phase of reclaiming myself is to take my side of it and only my side of it, which is really hard for me to do because my protector mechanism through 15 years of customer service and in my personal life is to look and see everyone else's shadow self and where their ego's triggered and understand where they're coming from. And then I'm like, oh, okay, they're like neutralized, right? Like even if they're rude or cruel or whatever, neutralized because I get where they're coming from. And with this criticizer, what I really need to do is I get to take my side. At least when, you know, my nervous system is activated and I'm in the moment. The thing to do right at that moment is not to try to understand where the other person's coming from, but to fully own that I'm allowed to try to understand what I'm feeling going through right now, regardless of them, right? So, and I get to act from that place. So I get to say, you know, what were my intentions? How did I feel? And that is the truth of my experience. And I get to state that in no uncertain terms. I feel like it's always been very hard for me to say for certain, like, this is exactly what happened, because I'm always like trying to give someone else the benefit of the doubt, right? So I'll always doubt myself first in order to understand the other person. And the healing of this, I guess, is to step into, you know, I get to acknowledge and fully be in what it felt like to have my experience of the situation in no uncertain terms. And then from there, they can express themselves and I can express myself and we can work it out, right? That's like a healthy way to work it out rather than a codependent way. This particular thing reminded me of a coworker that I had. Oh, when was that? 2018, I believe. She was amazing. We worked like 90 days together and that's it. And it's like, that's the only interaction we ever had, and I consider her a very dear friend because her soul is just freaking amazing. But she told me one time, I was trying to figure out like what my boss had said and what she's going to think of me, and she's like, you know, Carissa, sometimes you need to just rely on your own understanding of the situation and prioritize that. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like the moment she said it, I was like, this is fucking gold. I need this. And I was like, say that again. And I grabbed a pen and paper and wrote it down. It struck me so hard. And this is that again coming up. I am safe now, I am capable now, and I get to assume as much. I get to assume that I am safe now and capable now. And if I assert my truth and take my side and don't feel safe or capable, then I'm allowed to self-soothe and self-care until I do again. Then, and only then, if I wish to understand the other person's point of view because I want wisdom from a stranger or to repair a connection with a relationship, then I'm allowed to get curious about it. Always stopping to self-soothe if I begin to feel unsafe or incapable or not allowed to be myself or unable to take my own side and I start self-criticizing or blaming. Yeah, So really good stuff. There was probably about 6 of those big bullet points of understanding my perfectionist and inner critic that I could go through. I'll probably do it when my Diary of an Alchemist series, once that gets to the point of 2025 and relaying those experiences and I'm going through this journal, I'll probably go through it fully in depth at that time. But I really wasn't trying to make like a really ridiculously long video with this one, and it probably already went on too long. But anyways, so this was chapter 1 of this series of 4, and we're looking at how in the last 6 weeks I went through some really low times, like this particular episode, and went through some really high times in order to go through this process of expanding and shrinking and expanding and shrinking. And overall, what I'm doing is moving my set point of my nervous system to be able to handle more and to be able to express myself more and still feel safe in it. And it's terrifying going through all these emotions. And when you're going through it in the day to day, like this episode that I just recounted, how could I know at that time that over the next 6 weeks, you'll be going through a process in which you are reclaiming your value and your self-worth? You can't know that at that time, right? All you can do is like survive that particular episode and like do the best that you can. And you don't ever know until you get to the end of the cycle. Looking back, hindsight is 2020, and then you can see the bigger picture of it all. But yeah, this is this episode, the emotional flashback episode. In episode 2 of this little 4-part series, I'm going to talk about a camping trip that I went on pretty soon, just a few days after this episode. And I was still feeling very emotionally raw and vulnerable from this at that time. And I went through this massive soul nourishing experience, this like new expansion again of like who I get to be. Even when I experience things like that, and I was like, this is who I get to be when I'm around soul nourishing people. It's the emotional whiplash over the last 6 weeks is insanity, absolute insanity. So I went from having emotional CPTSD flashback to and like an all-time low self-hate to the next week all of a sudden like the most self-love I could ever feel of feeling so wild in my expression in the most peaceful and powerful way, and feeling seen, accepted, heard, and understood by a group of people while living in nature for a week, away from society, away from responsibility. I just like I stepped into the fullness of who I could be, and that was amazing. And then quickly had another episode where like I'm just like, this is not what I want after that week. So we're gonna go into that in chapter 2. So I hope you enjoyed, or it wasn't particularly pleasant, but I hope it was helpful to hear someone else's experience of going through this. And yeah, I will see you over there in chapter 2. Take care. Bye.